A democracy that's strong, fair, and true depends on you. Introducing On Air, a nonprofit, nonpartisan digital democracy network. It's a hub that connects citizens with their government and with the candidates,
Good afternoon. I'm Connor Oatman, and I will be your host for today's US On Air Aircast. Our sponsor today is Democracy On Air, a nonpartisan nonprofit that supports the US On Air network of 50 governance and election hubs at us.onair.cc. Our Aircast today will focus on the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, but particularly on Ukraine's request to the United States and NATO for a no-fly zone over their airspace. To help build information on this request, here is a video.
Here in the coastal city of Mykolaiv, every promise of a ceasefire and the precious chance for people to reach safety has been broken so far.
I have tears running down my face, although I'm a retired soldier. My wife was injured by shrapnel yesterday. She's now at hospital number 4. She was just about saved there. Now she's there and I'm here trying to sort things out somehow.
There's little optimism today's ceasefire will be any more successful.
So as harrowing stories like that play out all across Ukraine, Ukraine's President Zelensky is pleading with NATO for a no-fly zone in his country. But the U.S. and NATO have firmly rejected that idea for now, which would likely lead to a ground war with Russia, which of course is a nuclear power.
Joining us today to help us understand more about this situation, we have invited Ani Prakash. Ani is the current director of Democracy On Air's Ukraine On Air hub. Thank you for coming, Ani.
Yep, it's a pleasure being here.
So if you could give some comments and insight onto the situation as it stands right now.
Yeah, so currently it seems that the Ukrainian president, alongside some of Ukraine's senior government officials, are beseeching many Western leaders on imposing a no-fly zone. But with regards to the Western response on the Ukrainian proposal over a no-fly zone, it seems that they're a bit reluctant over imposing a no-fly zone in Ukraine, and it's conceivable because the U.S. and NATO allies are definitive that they don't want to engage in a direct confrontation with the Russians, as a no-fly zone basically sends signals that it's a declaration of war. If the U.S. and NATO work collectively on imposing a coercive restriction amongst Ukrainian airspace to restrict the flow of any fighter jet or any aircraft from Russia, then this would grant NATO the complete authorization to snipe down any Russian aircraft they detect, which clearly sends signals that it's a declaration of war. So it's understandable behind Ukraine's position over on their proposal for the no-fly zone, as they have been inflicted by a series of aerial bombardments launched by the Russians, especially one devastating missile strike that happened this past weekend at a civilian airport. So it's again understandable behind Zelensky's decision on beseeching many Western leaders to impose the no-fly zone, but at the same time, it's also conceivable for the Ukrainian officials to note that a no-fly zone basically means a declaration of war. And if the US and NATO were to impose a no-fly zone on Ukrainian airspace, then this is sending signals that the US and NATO will get engaged in a direct confrontation with the Russians, which is what they're basically not intending to do so. So here is the official hub for Ukraine On Air. Ukraine On Air basically is one of the newly established hubs, similar to US On Air, that works to promote the collective mission on promoting democratic interests and just the integrity of democracy within Ukraine, given that from some of the current situations unfolding in Ukraine, it appears that it's conceivable that their democracy is now under siege, and we feel that as members of US On Air, that it's in our best interest to, as part of promoting US democratic interests within Ukraine and preserving and safeguarding Ukraine's democracy from the threats of tyranny, that Ukraine On Air basically fulfills that mission in doing so. So then some of the tabs and issue posts that are listed, each entails just some brief descriptions on Ukraine, For the case of the governance tab, it lists some of the issues we plan on pinpointing with regards to our hub. And clearly this hub is just the stepping stone behind working to promote democratic interests in a country that is now under siege by the threats of autocracy and tyranny.
Thank you for your presentation. So what do you see as the primary goal for the Ukraine on Air Hub?
Yeah, so the primary goal, again, as iterated previously, of the Ukraine on Air Hub is to promote US democratic interests within Ukraine's democracy, working to preserve and safeguard Ukraine's democratic processes from the threats of tyranny, given that from some of the current situations unfolding, Ukraine's democracy is now under siege by the threats of autocracy since the invasion that happened on February 24th. So as the director of Ukraine on Air, one of my responsibilities as the head of the hub is again to extract parts of the collective mission laid out from the US on Air Hub and instead, let's say, lay it out for the Ukraine on Air Hub as part of ensuring that our hub or works to promote US democratic interests and even the integrity behind democracy within Ukraine, the same exact way that we're promoting the integrity of democracy within US on Air. And that's basically the collective mission behind Ukraine on Air, on the idea that we as members or as interns of Ukraine on Air work to will look forward to, or be looking to work and collaborate with individuals and even faculty members who have expertise on U.S. Ukrainian policy, ensuring that they would be willing to promote democratic interests within the Ukraine the same exact way that we are promoting democratic interests in the United States through U.S. on Air.
Thank you. I will now moderate an open discussion with our GMU panel about the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, specifically regarding the discussions of the potential no-fly zone over Ukrainian airspace. Starting with Ben, what do you think are the implications of this potential no-fly zone?
Well, I see Ukraine's call on the West to implement a no-fly zone as less of a strategic an actual military strategic move where they're expecting the West to actually impose a no-fly zone. I see it more as kind of like a when you in salary negotiations, when you overestimate how much you actually want, so that when you come to the what is expected, it seems more reasonable. I think that that's kind of what Ukraine is doing, is they're asking for a lot here, and what their real goal is to make marginal gains with the West's like with what the West is actually doing. So I don't really think that they're actually expecting a no-fly zone to be implemented, but I think they're just using this as a tactic to try and get gains marginally in various different areas.
I would have to agree. I view their call for a no-fly zone as more so political pandering than anything else, given that it is a highly unrealistic potentiality and notion that we would implement a no-fly zone, because that would bring the United States and NATO into direct conflict with Russia in order to maintain that no-fly zone, which is something that we've been trying to avoid pretty consistently and pretty steadfast in our actions this entire time the conflict has been going on. Most recently, even as detailed in an article that you can find on US on Air, with discussions of providing Polish Soviet-era MiG fighter jets to Ukraine, where Poland had surrendered them to the US for the US to provide them to Ukraine. And the US flat out denied providing them to Ukraine at all. They did not want to be implicated in providing military aid to Ukraine due to the potentiality of conflict with Russia.
Yeah, I would also agree that the whole beseeching pursued by Ukrainian leaders and President Zelensky on U.S. and NATO allies on the use of imposing a no-fly zone is just a signal to the rest of the world that the U.S. and NATO could be plunged into a direct conflict with Russia. I mean, if you look at several different historical occasions in which no-fly zones have been implemented, specifically in Bosnia and Libya and Iraq, I mean, these were different aggressors that the U.S. and NATO forces had encountered. And now, if you're looking at a no-fly zone in Ukraine, I mean, think about it. This is Russia and Ukraine. Russia has one of the world's largest nuclear arsenals, and if the no-fly zone is imposed through a concerted effort between the U.S. and NATO, then this could likely plunge the U.S. and NATO allies to engage in a direct conflict with the Russians, which for years the U.S. and NATO allies have consistently wanted to avoid. And I mean, honestly, with regards to the no-fly zone imposition, I mean, it's clear that many NATO forces are not necessarily prepared on engaging in a direct conflict with the Russians if a no-fly zone is imposed. I mean, the U.S. is a little bit reluctant on sending their F-22s and F-16s and their stealth jets to, be patrolling the skies of Ukrainian airspace day and night, just so that not just so that they wouldn't be able to, just so that they would prevent any flow of fighter jets or Russian aircraft. So the idea that of a no-fly zone clearly is a signal that a declaration of war can occur if a no-fly zone were to be imposed. And honestly, it's conceivable that the U.S. and NATO allies aren't doing anything necessary to avoid a direct confrontation with Russia and pursue that doctrine of strategic ambiguity, where they will continue to assist directly and militarily the Ukrainian forces on the front line, at the same time looking to diverge from the possibilities of or distance themselves from any possibility of engaging in a direct conflict with the Russians.
Thank you all for your comments. For the GMU community, Democracy on Air is sponsoring a Speak Up for Impact contest that promotes university competitions to have the most impact on local, state, and federal government in elections via informed civil discussion among university communities and their elected officials. Check out the us.onair.cc hub for more info. Here is one of the submissions.
Hello, Senator Menendez, Senator Booker, and Representative Malinowski. I would like to present a way to improve voting rights in the United States. The United States is often referred to as one of the strongest democracies, but as of late, there have been glaring cracks in the system that many have seen, culminating in the horrendous events of January 6, 2021, which threatened our very democratic institutions. From this, there are steps the United States government should take to strengthen them. One idea are stronger election and voting laws, which protect voters and their rights on Election Day. I think in many state legislatures, including New Jersey's, Election Day should be considered a federal holiday, and there should be more polling stations for those who are more likely to vote. These laws would need, and there are also election laws that would need to be repealed, such as having polling stations in districts that skew against them.